The Major had almost got drunk, he never did quite, on the strength of having foisted a special dispatch run and a wireless link under a displaced person's area authority on the verge of closure. He seemed very near believing that stuff like this represented a serious and adequate role for a group that had provided half the communications of an Army Corps group headquarters at war. He no longer excused the farce of having a signal office here at all by saying, untruly, that it kept the lads busy. The same shift of attitude had taken place over his road, this boulevard through the camp area, too short to matter except in terms of the energy its construction absorbed, and totally unnecessary anyway because of the dry summer, was about to be extended to other parts of the Major's tribal domain. Archer foresaw himself doing further stints of uninformed supervision, watching the hard core and rubble go down, scouring the village for more wheelbarrows, driving out the engineers' detachment to borrow yet more. Hitler had been funny too, but you had had to live in Valparaiso or somewhere to be able to laugh at him with conviction. A flight of green-painted wooden steps led up the side of the school. Sergeant Doll was sitting on them, evidently improving his tan. With the affability of a pub landlord at the entry of a notable big spender, he called from a distance, "Good morning to you, Mr. Archer. And how are you this fine morning, sir?" "Oh, fed up," Archer said unguardedly. "Well, I'm not, sir. I don't mind telling you." Doll made no move to get up and let Archer pass. "I've got plenty to eat and a decent bed and no work and nothing to spend my pay on, and nobody to bother me. I'm winning, sir." "Yes, you are, aren't you?" Archer, whose head was on a lower level than Doll's, noticed that the other seemed to have no hairs whatsoever in his nose. This had the effect of making his moustache appear, if not actually false, at any rate an isolated phenomenon. "That was a nice little spot of bother at the old House of Commons last night, sir, wasn't it? Of course that fellow Hargreaves, he's unbalanced, isn't he? A lot of these Reds are, you know. There must be something in that particular philosophy that sort of attracts such people. He must be a perfect little darling to have in the section, Master Hargreaves. I don't know how you put up with him, sir. Honestly, I don't. I'd have got rid of him many moons ago." "Oh, he's not as bad as all that. He is an educated man, after all." "That makes it 20 times worse, sir, in my view. The corruption of the best is worst. I remember reading that somewhere. You'd be the one who'd know where it comes from, I expect, sir, wouldn't you?" Archer looked up sharply, but Doll's eye was as bland as ever. "It's Latin," Archer said, "I think." "No doubt, sir. It's really a pity Hargreaves made an exhibition of himself like that. Damaged his own case, I thought. Don't you agree, sir?" There was a pause while Archer recalled what was perhaps his sole intelligently self-interested action since joining the company, putting a half bottle of whiskey on Doll's desk last Christmas Eve. Ever since then, the Major, who tended to make a confidant of Doll, had found that his little surprises for Archer, in the shape of unheralded inspections of the signal office and the like, had an odd way of turning out not to be surprises after all. Rather late in the day, Archer was discovering a related principle, that the army afforded unique scope for vindictiveness, and that disagreement on apparently neutral matters often provoked such a reaction. He knew now that the adjutant of the unit, who had of course gone to Potsdam with the others, had been that sort of person, selecting junior officers for troublesome duties less by caprice than by remembering who had most recently contested his opinion in the mess, even if the subject had been literature or the weather. Sometimes a tendency to confuse names, surprising in so incessant an advocate of attention to detail, gave his selections an involuntary impartiality. After thinking about it for 2 years, Archer was nearly sure that a historic mission to collect a new type of line transmission apparatus, entailing a journey 3/4 of the way across England and back in January, and 2 successive nights in an unheated railway carriage, had fallen to his share because a second lieutenant called Belcher, whom Archer hoped he did not in the least resemble, had a day or 2 earlier contradicted the adjutant about Alice in Wonderland. But as the adjutant got to know his subalterns better, such miscarriages of injustice had become rarer. Not that this change had been to Archer's advantage. Although Archer had never made any progress in finding out what Doll was like, he judged it unwise to risk diminishing the effect of that half-bottle by saying what he really felt about Hargreaves's outburst, and thence, inevitably, what he felt about Doll's politics. The Major's regime was doubtless drawing to a close, but its last days might well be marked by a fury of moral violence. Archer could not afford to irritate a friend at court, or anywhere else for that matter. He said decisively, "Yes, he did go too far, much too far. I think he feels a bit cheap about it today. You weren't annoyed, I hope?" "Oh, no, sir. My back is broad. As I say, all he did was help my side. That government'll fall soon, you mark my words. You were wanting to see the Major, sir, were you?" "Yes, I thought I might look in." "He's got Captain Cleaver with him at the moment. Ah, here is the captain now." Doll got up as Cleaver emerged from the doorway and descended the steps. Archer grinned at him. Cleaver was the one officer in the detachment whom he regarded with nothing but contempt. Groomed for stardom by the adjutant, and finally rejected on the grounds of technical incompetence. A tremendous achievement. He had got his captaincy, though. "Hello, Wilf," Archer said. "Oh, hello," Cleaver said, getting into his tone, surprise at being so familiarly addressed. He carried gloves and a short cane, and looked more than ever like a British officer as pictured in a German army manual. "The Major's waiting for you." The Major was looking out of the window. A cow wearing a large floppy hat had just run along part of the road, known to everyone but himself as Raleigh's Alley, and then turned off to flee up the lane past the wireless section's billet. From somewhere near at hand a loud, silly laugh had floated into the air. Whether this was associated with the cow or not, the two manifestations combined to pique and depress the Major. They formed for him a symbol of anarchy mounting, of discipline and seriousness and purpose melting away. He felt there was some connection here with the chance of a Labour victory at the polls. Apart from a few negligible wild men like Hargreaves and Archer, he had never met anyone who confessed to having cast his proxy vote for Labour. On a recent visit to the mess at Hildesfeld, he had made a point of questioning his hosts on the matter and had heard the same story. His wife's letters said that nobody knew of anybody in the whole town who was a Labour supporter, and that everybody felt very sorry for poor Mr. Jack, the Labour candidate. And yet the Major was uneasy. Something monstrous and indefinable was growing in strength, something hostile to his accent and taste in clothes, and modest directorship and ambitions for his sons, and red brick house at Purley with its back garden tennis court. Somebody tapped on the door. The Major called, "Yes," and started speaking the moment Archer began crossing the threshold. A valuable foil, this, to his normal keep-'em-waiting procedure. "Now, Frank, where's the summary of communications?" Archer walked over to Cleaver's table and instantly picked up a duplicated form in pale blue ink with manuscript additions. "Here it is, sir." The Major took it and went back to his seat. On the whole, he seemed mollified rather than the contrary. "About this Parliament business, Frank, I'm not at all happy about it." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir." "I'm seriously thinking of closing it down." "Surely there's no need for that." "That disgusting display of Hargreaves's last night. Couldn't you have prevented it? After all, as Speaker, you must have some... And as an officer, you... I don't think that anything but force would have... Worst thing in the world for discipline, if the blokes get the idea that they can simply... Oh, I don't agree at all, sir." The Major's eyes narrowed. "What?" "It's a chance for them to let off steam, you see. They're off parade. Rank doesn't count in there. Everyone accepts that. I mentioned last night to Doll just now, and he obviously didn't resent it." "That's not the point. And if rank doesn't count, why aren't officers and WOs allowed to take full part instead of having to sit out like that? I let you have your way there, since you were organising the thing, but I never followed your argument." "Well, sir, rank doesn't count there really, but chaps may think it does. They might feel chary of giving let's say, Wilf Cleaver a proper hammering when they wouldn't if it was a corporal from another section, or even their own." I don't think the blokes are quite as stupid as you make out." Archer shrugged. "Tell me, Frank, I've often wondered, why do you hang on to Hargreaves when you've had so many chances to get rid of him? Does the section no good all round, having a type like that in it? Bad for morale." "I just feel he's more or less settled in there. He's not much liked, but at least he's tolerated. Anywhere else he'd probably have a much thinner time." "But good God, man, a signal section doesn't exist to give a home to stray dogs and to wet nurse people. It's supposed to be an efficient unit in a war machine. Hargreaves can't do the Allied cause much harm now." Perhaps I'd better remind you, Frank, that we're all still in uniform and that our country is still at war. We're not on holiday." Standing before the Major's table, Archer shrugged again and put his hands on his hips. His eye fell on a framed text that said, "Ich will mich Freundesherren und fröhlich sein in Gott." "Confidentially now, old boy, what's the matter with Hargreaves? Basically the matter." "That's very simple, sir. He doesn't like the army." The Major laughed through his nose. "I should imagine very few of us would sooner be here than anywhere else. If a man isn't a cretin, he knows it's a question of getting a job done, a very important job. I take it you agree?" "Oh, yes, sir. And Hargreaves is clear on that, too. But it isn't being in the army that gets him down. It's the army." "I'm afraid you're being too subtle for me, Frank." "Well, as far as I can make him out, he's not an easy man to talk to, but the way he sees it, people have been nasty to him in the army in a way they wouldn't be in civilian life. The army puts power into the hands of chaps who've never had it before, not that sort of power, and they use it to inflict injustices on other chaps whom they happen to dislike for personal reasons. That's the way the army works, according to Hargreaves." "Don't stand like that, Frank," Riley said, and waited until Archer had removed his hands from his hips and put them behind his back. "Well, whatever friend Hargreaves feels about being in the army, you can tell him from me to pull himself together. So far I've tried to keep the original company in one piece as far as possible. When postings come through, I've been seeing to it that they've got passed on to these new arrivals. But there's always plenty of call for blokes with Hargreaves's qualifications, or lack of them rather, and I can get him out of the way any time I want to. If there's one more bit of nonsense from him, I'll see he's on the first available boat to Burma. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir. I'll tell him." "And what's going on between him and young Hammond?" "Going on? Nothing that I know of. They are friends. Hammond's about the only chap Hargreaves talks to." "Is that all he does to him?" "Talk." "I don't know what you're driving at, sir." "Oh, yes, you do, Frank. Don't you try and bullshit me. There's something pretty unsavory about that friendship, as you call it, if half I hear is true." "I'll go and fetch Hargreaves and Hammond now, sir, if you like, and you can fetch whoever's been telling you this and get him to repeat it in front of them. And me, too, of course, as their section officer." "There's no need to take that tone, old boy. I'm simply telling you as a friend to be on your guard. You don't want a scandal in the section, do you? Hammond's a good lad, and I shouldn't like him to get into any sort of trouble. If things turn out the way they might, I'd consider him favourably for Lance Corporal. Well, I suppose you'd better be getting back to the signal office. Sorry to have kept you, but this Hargreaves business has been on my mind, rather." "Yes, sir." "Oh, before you go, Frank, any news of Journey's End?" "The librarian chap in Hildesfeld says he'll do his best, but it's been out of print for years. The British Drama League in England are on the job now, apparently." "Good. I hope it comes through. It would be fun to have a shot at putting it on. Do you know it at all?" "I'm afraid not, sir." "It's good stuff, you know, Frank. You'd like it. The best thing on the First War by far. Really gets the spirit of the trenches, the feel of what it was like." 3. Major Raleigh stood on the steps of the farmhouse where the officers' mess was, trying to smell the lilac bushes. He was having a hard time of it. Competing smells included the one from the cookhouse bonfire, a mixture of rum and hot cardboard, the one from the hen-house where the mess's looted chickens lived, the one from the piggery, the one from nowhere and everywhere that was apparently endemic to continental farmyards, about midway between that of a brewery and that of burning cheese rind. As one of his own wireless operators might have tried to tune out interference, the Major stopped and laid his soft nose alongside one of the pale clusters. It tickled, but he got something. The voice of Cleaver spoke behind him. "Are you all right, Major?" "Of course I'm all right," Raleigh said, wheeling round as he came upright. "I'm sorry, I thought you were ill." "Well, I'm not. Are you ready?" "Yes, Major. Nobody else seems to want to come." "Did you ask them?" "Yes, Major." "All of them?"
"Yes, Major."
"It's a pity some of them couldn't have taken the trouble to come along," Raleigh said, voicing a desire for his brother officer's company that was to cool sharply within the hour. "All right, Wilf, let's get moving. We're late already." The two got into the Major's car, a saloon with faded checkerboard painting on the radiator and a cracked mica windscreen. Its only superiority over the Major's Jeep lay in the latter vehicle's having reached the stage of needing to carry a can of petrol, a can of oil, and a large can of water whenever it went anywhere. And this thing was a piece of loot, too. While he pulled at the starter and the motor lurched over, Raleigh imagined his friends at Potsdam, each in a Mercedes with the back full of cameras, watches, automatic pistols, pairs of binoculars, crates of champagne and vodka and American whiskey, haunches of venison. Girls did not appear on the Major's list. He considered that side of life much overrated. Before the car came shudderingly to life, he had time for a surge of feeling, equally compounded of envy and righteous indignation, at the memory of a current rumour about a large RAF signals unit, which, ordered to return to England with all its stores and transport, and thus secure against customs inspection, had stuffed every cranny with cameras, watches, automatic pistols, perhaps girls. They moved out of the yard with a grinding bump when one of the rear mudguards, worse adjusted than its fellow, met the edge of the road surface. The sun was setting over the fields of rye or oats or barley, or perhaps just wheat, and there was arguably a fair amount of tranquillity and such about, but the Major was beyond its reach. As he frequently said, it was people that interested him. The people interesting him at the moment were still the ones he knew at Potsdam. "Funny to think of them all up there," he said. "Bill and the CO and Jack Rowney and Tom Thurston and all that crowd, and Rylands and Ben and Eliseo and Jock Watson. Wonder what they're all up to. Parties with the Russians and the Yanks and God knows what. All the big brass hats around. The Jerrys, too. And—" The Major tried briefly to visualize what more might be on view there than other soldiers. "Everything. Of course I realize we couldn't all have gone, but I do wish—" The CO and the adjutant tended to pick the crowd who'd been with them at North Midland Command. "Yes, I know they did." A military Calvinist, who'd had demonstrated to him his own non-membership of the elect, Raleigh spoke in a neutral tone. "Not altogether, though. They took Delisio with them." "I wonder why?" "Rylands seemed to think Delisio was indispensable," the Major said. Then, quite as if he realized that this was not the most tactful thing to say to a man whom all sorts of pressure had failed to get into Delisio's job, he added, "I wouldn't go all the way with him there." "I hear Bill and Jack and Tom are all majors now." "Yes, I'm particularly pleased Tom got his crown. He didn't fit in quite at first, I thought. Bit of an awkward cuss. But sometime last winter he pulled himself together and started doing a first-class job. Cooperated for all he was worth." The car laboured up an incline past the burnt-out wreck of a civilian lorry, relic of the celebrations on VE night. The cuff of a Wehrmacht jacket, charred and faded, hung out of the remains of the cab. Raleigh was about to comment adversely on this memorial of indiscipline or of high spirits, but changed his mind and said abruptly, "I'd give anything to be at Potsdam." "I'd have thought we were better off here, Major, with the staff off our backs at last after 2 years." "They're doing a job there, that's the difference. I suppose I might still get the chance of taking the company to the Far East. Depends how the war goes, partly." The Major was thinking, as usual, in terms of a headquarters signals unit, not of a mere company, and of a lieutenant colonelcy, but he was too shy to tell Cleaver this. "I didn't realize you were as keen on the army as all that, sir," Cleaver said, carefully. "Well, I've been doing a lot of thinking these last few weeks, Wilf. Serious thinking. First real chance I've had since 1939. I worked it out that I've spent half my adult life in the army. Pretty shaking thought, that. I've got used to being in uniform. Hardly remember what it was like in Civvy Street. From the way things are going, it looks as if I might not care for it when I arrive there. If these socialists get in, I shouldn't worry too much, Major. However badly it turns out, there's sure to be scope for, well, initiative and quick thinking and all the rest of it." "I hope you're right." The Major parked the car in the signal office yard between an iron canister full of broken glass and a disused boiler stuffed with torn sheets. The two officers crossed the road to the school building and entered the hall. Parliament was in session. As Raleigh led the way to the visitors' gallery, his shoes thudding on the greasy bare boards, an instrument mechanic on the government side was saying, "We're going to build a decent Britain. Fair shares for all, and free schools and doctoring and hospitals, and no class distinction. The old school tie and the old boy network aren't going to work anymore. To make sure of that, we're going to abolish the public schools in Oxford and Cambridge, or at any rate change them so that anybody who's got the brains can go to them, and we're going to either abolish the House of Lords or make it a thing you vote on, just like the House of Commons. It's undemocratic any other way. Some of us want to abolish the royal family for the same reason, but we're not decided about that. Personally, I think that if you scrap titles and the honours list and all that carry on, then you can leave the King and Queen to stew in their own juice. The Major's mouth tightened. So far he had refrained from interjecting more than a sentence or two into these debates, but after what he had just heard, and in this evening's intensified mood of discontent, he knew he would be failing in his duty to all sorts of entities, to common sense, to discipline both military and civil, to England, yes, and to the King. Why be ashamed of it, if he refrained from extensive comment? His eye met that of Cleaver, who looked away instantly. The Major waited impatiently for the Home Secretary, or whatever he was, to finish. Interest in the Parliament had fallen off from the moment of its inception. Deliveries of newspapers and magazines had recently improved in speed and quantity, and the Major suspected that access to civilian drink had likewise improved. He must get his batman to keep his ears open. Less than half the original members were in their seats tonight. The opposition front bench lacked its leader and its spokesman on defence questions. Dole had declared himself finally disgusted with his fellow MP's frivolity. "I think it's ridiculous spending a lot of your time and thought preparing stuff for a load of apes, sir, don't you?" The ministerial bench was even more thinly held, with the Lord Privy Seal, if the truth were known, risking court-martial by thoroughly fraternising with a nurse from the civilian hospital in Hilsfelt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer asleep on his bed with a 3-day-old Daily Express over him, the Prime Minister himself, with 2 of his mates from the sergeant's mess, attacking something they vaguely thought of as gin, and something they even more vaguely thought of as a pub on the far side of the railway yard. But the Foreign Secretary was in his seat, and the young man the Major very precisely thought of as that official's boyfriend was in his. The Home Secretary might have been thought to be drawing to a close, although, as the Major reminded himself, you can never tell about that or anything else with fellows as unused as this to public speaking, or indeed to anything else even remotely to do with the highly responsible and specialised and difficult task of running a modern industrial state. "You heard the other week about how we're going to give the Empire back to the blokes that live there," the Home Secretary was saying. "Well, we're going to do the same thing, so to speak, with Great Britain itself. The country belongs to the ordinary working bloke, and by Christ, he's going to be running things from now on. No messing." The Major brushed his moustache with his knuckle and looked at the cracked and scaled maps, which, in the absence of anything else that might blot out some of the clay-coloured plaster, somebody had pulled out of a cupboard and hung up. What a mess Europe had evidently been in 1555, with all those hundreds of little countries, quite different from today, and how big Naples and Venice had been then. The Major remembered enough German to wonder how there could ever have been 2 Sicilies, and again, who was Van Diemen, and how had he filled in his time in Tasmania. "Good enough, then," the Home Secretary said. "There are just 3 principles involved here: liberty, equality, and fraternity. You'll remember that that's what the French Revolution was about. Well, we're not going to have a revolution about it. That's not the way we do things in England, not violent revolutions anyway, with barricades and shooting and so on and so forth. But there's going to be a revolution nevertheless, and nobody's going to stop us." He sat down amid varied applause from his own side. The Major looked at the Speaker for the first time and raised a finger in assumed humility. Archer seemed to pretend not to have seen him at first, then, having looked round the chamber, caught his eye and nodded to him. "I shan't keep you long," the Major said, as he rose to his feet, "but there are just 1 or 2 points I feel I ought to put to you, if I may. We're all equal here. We're all members for Arromanches, and Bayeux, and Amiens, and Brussels, and Mechelin, and Tilburg, and Munster, and Rhine, and all the rest of the bloody places, and we can talk to each other as gentlemen. We've been through the whole thing together. And the first thing I want to say to you is this: everybody's done a first-class job. You have, and I hope we have as far as it was possible to us, and of course the fighting troops, nobody can say what they went through. Anyway, sitting here tonight, it just occurred to me that it would be an awful pity if we were to let one another down by forgetting the things that have made it all possible. the teamwork and sense of responsibility, and behind that, the way of life we've been fighting for. We've always been a pretty good-natured lot, we British, and the fellow up here," he raised his hand to shoulder level, "and the fellows down there," he extended his arm downwards with the hand still spread, "have always got on pretty well together. Each has had his job to do." Hargreaves stood up and said, "I spy strangers." He spoke loudly but unemotionally, as if promulgating his occupation rather than delivering a challenge. The Major stopped speaking immediately and looked towards the speaker with an expression of courteous bafflement. The speaker's expression was of incredulous horror. He said, Hargreaves, can't we—" "I spy strangers," Hargreaves repeated a little louder, gazing into space. "Could I ask you to clarify that, Mr. Speaker, sir?" the Major asked good-humouredly. Archer replied as if the words were being wrung out of him. "I was reading. It's a formula calling for the expulsion of unauthorized persons from the debating chamber. The idea was—" "Unauthorized persons?" Smiling, the Major glanced from face to face. "But surely—" "The thing is that, officially, only members of Parliament are allowed to be present," Archer said, more steadily than before. "Anybody else is here on sufferance. I spy strangers is the way of saying you want to cancel that sufferance, so to speak." Raleigh still smiled. "Are you ordering me to withdraw, Mr. Speaker?" "I'm telling you what the book says." In the pause that followed, the Major again looked round the house, but nobody returned his look. He went on trying to think of something to say until it became clear to him that there was nothing to say. With a glance at Cleaver, who quickly rose and followed him, Major Raleigh withdrew. Outside in the darkness he said, "You drive, Wilf, will you? I want to think." "Are you all right, Major?" "Wilf, if you ask me if I'm all right once more, I'll— Anyway, don't. Just shut up." "Yes, sir." 4. "Well, you must be pretty pleased, Mr. Archer, I expect, at the way things have gone." "Yes, I must admit I am, Sergeant. Such a thumping majority, too." "Yes, that did rather take me by surprise. I expected it to be a much closer run thing than this. Of course, being wise after the event, it's not difficult to see what happened. The service vote did it. The lads have been in uniform all these years and they've had enough. Voting Labour's a protest. It's a way of saying you're browned off and want to go home." "Oh, there's a lot more to it than that, I'm quite sure. People are browned off with something, or rather somebody, a lot of somebodies. They're protesting against—" "Well, you and I are never going to see eye to eye there, sir, are we? Not even if we discuss it all night. We might as well accept it." "Will you join me in a glass of whisky, Sergeant? If it doesn't seem too like drowning your sorrows while I celebrate." "Thank you, sir, I will. You've certainly got something to celebrate, and everybody else seems to be doing it, so I don't see why I shouldn't join in." Doll and Archer sat in the little sitting-room, all painted screens and wax fruit and clocks under glass domes, of the farmhouse that contained the officers' mess. Outside, a widespread uproar was distantly audible. Shouts, the revving of jeep and motorcycle engines, the braying of a trombone that was being blown through rather than played. 10 minutes ago what sounded very much like a long burst of light machine-gun fire had come from the direction of the signal office. There was no reason to suppose that all this was a demonstration of socialist triumph over cowed and silent Tories. Whether or not Doll was right about the motives which had prompted the return of a Labour government in Great Britain, the local reaction to it tonight was largely non-political in temper. "They're keeping hard at it," Doll said, pointing out of the open window to a sudden burst of flame somewhere across the road. It was brighter than the now hour-old bonfire in the billet area. A few figures could be seen in the light of the new conflagration, reeling in and out of the darkness like pantomime drunks. "Funny how nobody seems to be interfering. The Major's right about one thing anyway. Discipline's going." "Funny how nobody seems to be interfering. The Major's right about one thing anyway. Discipline's going." "Ah, thank you, sir." He raised one of the glasses of whisky which the mess corporal had brought in response to Archer's bellow. "Well, a solemn moment. What shall it be?" "I give you England, Mr. Archer." "England." Not your England, Archer said to himself. Not the petrol-flogging CQMS's England, not the Major's England, or Cleaver's England, or the Adjutant's, or the Colonel's, or Jack Rowney's, or Tom Thurston's England, but to a certain extent Hargreaves's England, and absolutely my England, full of girls and drinks and jazz and books and decent houses and decent jobs and being your own boss. He said in a friendly tone, "I wonder whether England's going to turn out the way you'd like her to." "Oh, I've no doubt she won't, sir, but that's not really going to concern me much. I shan't be there, you see. Emigration's the thing for me as soon as I can fix it up." "Really? Where are you thinking of? Canada? Australia?" "I think Africa, Mr. Archer. A place where there's room for initiative, and where a determined man can still make his way. Kenya, perhaps, or one of the Rhodesias. There's some scope there. No, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and today's news really decided me, taken a load off my mind in a way. Funny thing, I should be feeling depressed with the socialists getting in, but I don't at all. Quite the contrary, in fact." Doll drained his glass. "How about another of those?" "No, thank you, sir. I really should be getting along and seeing the Major. It's what I came for, after all." "I'll take you up." "There is just one point you might be able to help me with first, sir, if you would." Doll opened the buff file cover he had brought with him. "This posting advice. I expect you know how the Major's got all that organized. He can send who he likes. Well, he's asked to provide 8 bodies of various kinds, all signal office personnel. They'll be in training for the UK in a couple of days, 28 days leave, then the boat for Burma. I should imagine they'll all be joining the same unit out there. Now, the Major's been in a funny mood recently, sort of withdrawn. Normally he'd nominate all these bodies personally, but this morning he gave me 3 names and told me to fill in the others myself. Not like him at all. Anyway, I was just wondering if there's anybody in your section you'd care to lose. Apart from Hargreaves, that is. He was one of the Major's 3, as you probably know." "Yes, he did mention it to me. Tell me, Sergeant Doll, is there a vacancy for a switchboard operator on that list?" "There is, sir. 2, in fact." It's tempting, but I'm afraid—"
"Perhaps it will help you to make up your mind, Mr. Archer, if I tell you now that I wasn't going to bother the Major with signing the order himself."
"He's got enough on his mind already. And of course any officer's signature would do. Yours, for instance, sir." Archer hesitated. "He's bound to see the file copy." "Yes, sir, but that won't be until tomorrow morning, will it? And I was thinking of dropping the top copy off for transmission at the signal office tonight, when I go back down. Get it out of the way." "He could cancel it, and send an amended list." "Oh, do you think that's likely, sir? Major Raleigh wants to be thought of as someone who can take a quick decision and stick to it. It's like a moral code with him." "A good point, Sergeant. Very well, then. I think I'll nominate Signalman Hammond." 14156755 Signalman Hammond, Jr., SBO, D2. Doll ran his fingertip along a line of typing. "Anybody else? Right. Now, if you just sign here, sir. Thank you. I suppose you'll be off yourself soon, Mr. Archer, won't you, after what you were telling me?" "I imagine so. Well, you won't be needing the Major after all now, I suppose?" "Oh, yes, I will, sir. That was just a routine matter. Something far more important has come up. There's a signal here from War Office telling 424 Wireless Section, 502 Line Section, and 287 DR Section to stand by to move on 24 hours' notice. Half the company. They've obviously decided we're to be broken up." "That's important, all right," Archer said. "To the Major more than anyone else, probably." "My feeling exactly, sir. That was why I thought it couldn't wait till the morning. I reckoned I had to let him know about it tonight." Doll's eyes grew distant. "He'd set his heart on taking the company out east." "Oh, don't I know it, Mr. Archer. That's the end of that ambition. I wonder what the next pipe dream will be." Suddenly getting to his feet, Doll roamed about the room with his hands in his pockets, an uncharacteristic bodily movement. "It may surprise you to learn, sir," he said cordially, "that I'm by way of being a bit of an angler. Been at it since I was a boy. Well now, it used to surprise me very much at first how badly I got on with other anglers. Jealousy rather than congratulations if you managed to pull off something a bit out of the ordinary. No end of disagreements over red hackles and what not. And a lot of boredom, too. Now, in one way, you wouldn't expect that, sir, would you? You'd expect people who got interests in common to get on better with one another than the average, not worse. But when you come to think about it, it's not so odd. Someone who's a bit like yourself can rub you up the wrong way, worse than a chap who's totally different. Well, there's one obvious instance. I bet a lot of the lads in this company hate their officers and NCOs a sight worse than they ever hated Jerry. They know them, you see. You'll have to forgive me for reciting you a sermon, Mr. Archer, but this is a point about human nature that's always interested me, and it has got an application. I take it I wouldn't be intruding on your mental privacy, so to speak, sir, if I hazarded a guess that you regard myself and the Major as pretty much birds of a feather. I think that's fair enough. Thank you, sir. In that case, it may surprise you to learn that I can't think of anybody whom I despise as thoroughly as I despise the Major. I know you hate him yourself, or I wouldn't risk telling you this. You'll be leaving us soon anyway. Archer's puzzlement, which had been growing for the last 5 minutes, changed direction. But I've got personal reasons. I too, though they're quite different from yours. He's so sure he's better, but in fact he's shoddy material, third-rate, not to be depended on. In many parts of the world, over the next few years, an important battle's going to be fought, largely against the ideas that you yourself stand for, sir, if I may say so with all respect. The Major's going to be worse than useless to us there, to me, and the people who think as I do. He's soft. He'll break. I can see him standing as a Labour candidate in 10 years' time, if the wind's still blowing that way. No principle. That's the one thing I can't forgive. Partly to throw off complacency at being taken into a fascist's confidence, Archer stood up briskly and said, "I'll take you up to the Major now." "Right, sir. I wish I'd been there to see him thrown out of that last Parliament. Good for Hargreaves. And you yourself too, sir, of course." The muffled bang of an exploding petrol tank reached them as they climbed the steep, narrow stairs to the main anteroom. This had been created by the folding back of folding doors between 2 former bedrooms and the importation of furniture from all over the house and elsewhere. Outside it was a tiny landing hedged by slender carved banisters. Archer left Doll here and went in. The Major was sitting in half of the curious high-backed double armchair, a favourite of his despite its clear resemblance to part of a railway carriage seat. Probably he found it suited his characteristic activity, the having of a word, whether denunciatory or conspiratorial, with someone. He had been having one now, an earnest one occupied by gesture with the young and usually solitary Lieutenant-Colonel of Engineers, whose thirst for schnapps had established him as a local personality. In his hand at the moment was a glass not of schnapps, but of the mess's whisky, a glass which, appearance suggested, had been emptied and refilled several times that evening. The Colonel was rather elaborately accoutred, with belt, holster, revolver, and lanyard. Both he and the Major, who likewise seemed to have taken drink, were dramatically illuminated by a many-tiered candelabrum that made great use of frosted glass. Raleigh had interrupted his confidential word with the Colonel to have a more public one with the mess corporal, who was saying, "About 40, I should say, sir. Well dressed, quite respectable." "And where's this picture she says she wants?" "It was in her bedroom when it was a bedroom, sir." "But it isn't her bedroom any more. The house isn't hers either. It's been requisitioned. It belongs to me. No, she can't have a picture. I don't care whether she painted it herself or not. She can't have it. Go and tell her so, will you?" When he saw that Archer was near, the Major turned his back as far as was possible without actually kneeling on his seat. The emotion he felt for the ex-Speaker of the now officially dissolved Parliament was not military disapprobation, nor yet personal anger, but sadness at the other's withholding of loyalty. All this and much more had been gone into at length the morning after Hargreaves had spied strangers. Archer had protested, with every appearance of sincerity, that the strangers could have been suffered to remain if anybody had thought to put forward a simple motion proposing this, and that nothing but general ignorance of procedure had brought about their exit. Raleigh paid no heed. In the course of a sad and objective appraisal of Archer's disloyalty, he had recounted rumours about Archer's private life, which, if repeated before witnesses, and if the law of slander had run in the army, might have been the occasion of awards and damages sufficient to buy and sell the contents of the officer's shop. Then, still avowing sadness, the Major had announced that his duty to the company forbade the retention in its ranks of anybody so provenly disloyal. In other words, it was Burma for Archer as soon as the Major's pal at HQ could fix it. After that, the Major had sadly shouted at Archer to get out of his sight. Archer had, and as far as possible had stayed there, but now he had to get back into it for a moment. To facilitate this, he leant against the sideboard, could it have been made of ebony, and faced the couple in the double armchair. The R.E. Colonel, whose name was Davison, was not the kind of man to appeal to Raleigh. He was what Raleigh was fond of calling a disorganized sort of chap, meaning someone whose character had not been stripped down like a racing car until nothing but more or less military components remained. But it was his policy to encourage colonels and such to be around. Colonel Davison, once acquainted with the volume and regularity of the mess's liquor supply, had needed no encouragement. At the moment he was saying in his public school voice, another selling point for the Major, "But as I keep telling you, that's why the army is so good, because nobody could take the bloody nonsense seriously." The Major came back with something inaudible to Archer, probably that he couldn't go all the way with the Colonel there. "Well, nobody with any sense, then," Davison said, "and that saves an awful lot of worry. Means you can start laughing." Again the Major could not be heard, but this time he went on much longer. Davison listened, nodding steadily, his eyes on his glass, which he was rotating on the knee of his crossed leg. Archer's attention wandered. It came to rest on Cleaver, who was half lying on a purple sofa, reading an unexpurgated edition of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Archer had had a go at that too. General opinion in the mess was that it ranked about halfway in the little library the Batmen had been assiduously building up ever since the company entered urban France. Not so good as, say, Frank Harris's My Life and Loves, but clearly better than the available non-fictional treatments of these themes, vital books by Scotsmen with titles like Married Happiness. Cleaver laughed silently to himself, then looked quickly and furtively round without catching Archer's eye. "It's all a joke," Davison said loudly. "The whole thing." The Major saw Archer. "Yes?" "Sergeant Doll would like to see you, sir. He's just outside." When Raleigh had gone, Davison patted the space beside him. "Come and sit down, laddie." "Thank you, sir." "Sir. Sir, sir, sir. Sir, 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 sir. Sir, sir, sir. Ha." From the way Davison swayed about in his seat as he said this, Archer concluded that he was not just drunk, but very drunk. "Nice little place we've got here, don't you think?" "Oh, delightful, delightful. Your poor Major's upset. Have you been being nasty to him? Have a drink. Corporal, more whiskey needed here. Crash priority." "I'm never nasty to Majors," Archer said. "Aren't you? I am, all the time. One of the consummations. Compensations. What do you do in Civvy Street, laddie?" The Colonel was perhaps 5 years older than Archer. "I don't do anything. Not yet. I was a student." "Jolly good luck to you. I'm an electrical engineer, so of course they put me on bridges. But it's all experience. Very good preparation, the army." "For what?" "Everything." As they received their drinks, Archer became aware that an altercation was going on just outside the room, with raised voices and what sounded like part of a human frame bouncing off the door. Was Doll fighting Raleigh? "Just about everything. You'll have learnt a lot in the last few years which will stand you in good stead when you get into the great world." Archer's mouth opened. "You mean that this is what life is like?" "Roughly." Doll called from the doorway. "Would you come, Mr. Archer, quickly?" Archer hurried over, followed by Davison, who said, "If there's anything to see, I'm going to see it." 4 men confronted one another in the confined space at the stairhead. Hargreaves, Sergeant Fleming, Doll, and Raleigh. Whatever he might have been doing a moment earlier, Hargreaves was doing nothing now except being held from behind by Fleming, and denounced by Raleigh. Dall stood to one side, his file under his arm. "I didn't know anything like this was going to happen, sir," Fleming shouted to Archer. "He just said very quiet he'd like to see the Major if he was free, to apologise to him about the Parliament. And I said couldn't it wait till the morning, and he said still very quiet, his conscience was—" "You dare come here and say that to me?" Raleigh shouted through this. His soft face had a glistening flush. "You dirty little homo! Can't leave a decent lad alone. Rotten to the core. I know what goes on in that billet of yours. I'm going to take you off that draft and have you court-martialed for filth. There are plenty of people who'd be only too glad." Cleaver stepped forward and caught him by the arm. "Shut up, Major. Pipe down, you bloody fool. Come back in here, for Christ's sake." The Major shook off Cleaver's hand. The movement brought him face to face with Archer. A theatrical sneer twisted Raleigh's soft features. "And as for you, tarred with the same brush, an officer. Selected for his qualities of leadership. That's good. I like that." There was a pause. The moment it was over, Archer realised that he should have used it either to help Fleming get Hargreaves down the stairs or help Cleaver get Raleigh back into the anteroom. He could even have told the Major just a little of what he thought of him, but he spent the time quailing under the Major's stare. Panting a little, Raleigh took up a fighting stance in front of Hargreaves. At the same time, Colonel Davison spoke from the edge of the group. "That'll do, everybody." Fleming's expression made Archer turn quickly. He saw with incredulity that Davison was leaning against the door-jamb and levelling his drawn revolver in Raleigh's general direction. "Often wanted to use this," Davison said. He was thin and very tall. "Properly, I mean. Not just on pigeons. Well, better late than never." "Put that away, Colonel," Cleaver said. Davison grinned. "Sounds as if I'm exposing myself. But I know what you mean. My turn now. Who's going to make me?" "Let's be sensible." At this, Davison collapsed in laughter. "What up to you, by God? Funny, isn't it? Always turns out like this if you try to do anything. Chaps say, let's be sensible. Let's be that, whatever we do. Oh, my Christ." Still laughing, he staggered through the group and ended up by the banisters, laboriously trying to fit his revolver back into its holster. The Major swung back towards Hargreaves. Afterwards, opinion was divided on whether he was really going to hit him, but Dall evidently thought so, for he bounded forward and shouldered the Major aside. Raleigh collided hard with Davison, whose attention was distracted by his revolver and holster, and who at once, with a single cracking of wood, fell through the banisters and down into the tiled hall. He landed with another cracking sound which made the backs of Archer's thighs turn cold. Dall ran down the stairs, closely followed by Cleaver. Hargreaves said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Archer." 5. "Cup of tea for you, sir, and the newspapers." "Thank you. Did you get on to the hospital?" Major Raleigh spoke almost without inflection, as he usually did these days. "Yes, sir. Progress maintained. Too early yet to say when he'll be up and about again, but the concussion's definitely not as bad as they thought at first, and the arm's coming along as well as can be expected after a complicated fracture." Outside, heavy transport could be heard toiling in low gear. "What's that row?" "That's 424 Wireless forming up to move out, sir. They're due at the railhead at 1500 hours. "I know. Are you going down to see them off, sir?" "No." "Oh, by the way, Colonel Davison sent you a message, sir." "Did he?" "Yes, he did, sir. Thanks for the party, and he hopes he wasn't a nuisance." The Major screwed up his soft face as a motorbike revved up in the road below. "Shut the window, will you, Dall?" "Right, sir." The operation completed, Dall turned round and leant against the sill. "Well, we've all been very lucky, sir, really, haven't we? Things might have turned out much more serious. By the way, I thought you were very wise not to go on with that idea of yours of having Hargreaves court-martialed. Very wise indeed, sir. When I want your opinion of my decisions, Dall, I'll ask for it." This tripped less well off the Major's tongue than it might have done at another time. Only Colonel Davison's accident had prevented that last encounter with Hargreaves from degenerating into a serious breach of order. The persistence of this thought bothered Raleigh. He said wearily, "And while you're here, I'd like you to tell me in detail how Hammond got onto that list with Hargreaves." "I've nothing to add to my previous account, sir. But still, you asked me to complete the list at my discretion, right? So seeing Hargreaves' name there, and knowing that Hammond was his mate, I put him down too. We've always done that sort of thing." "Is that all you knew?" "Why, of course, sir. What else is there to know?" "How did Archer come to sign that message?" "Well, again, as before, sir. Mr. Archer happened to call in at the orderly room, and I asked him, as I might have asked any officer who was available. There were one or two things piled up, and I wanted to get them off." "Did Mr. Archer read it through before he signed it?" "I really couldn't say, sir. Quite likely he had enough confidence in me not to bother. You've often done the same yourself, sir, and believe me, I very much appreciate the implied compliment." "Are you telling me the truth, Dol?" "Mr. Archer will confirm every word I've said, sir, as far as it concerns him." The Major sighed heavily. "I suppose that's that." "I suppose so, sir. Actually, it's a pity we've lost Hammond. Very pleasant young fellow, I agree, but it's not going to make much difference, sir, is it? There'd have been nothing for him to do here after the signal office closes down next week. I don't suppose any of us will be together much longer. Captain Cleaver and Mr. Archer and the others on 24-hour warning. You'll be all on your own here before very long, sir." "I'm looking forward to it." Dol almost smiled. "Of course it's Mr. Archer who's come best out of this. Dodging the Far East, after all. What a bit of luck that was, eh, sir?" Something close to attention entered the Major's manner. "Dodging the Far East?" "Oh, no doubt about it, sir. Even if he goes tomorrow, it'll take him 10 days to get home the way things are. Then he'll go on 28 days' leave, which will bring him to the first week in September, and with his release due a month at most after that, it wouldn't be worth anybody's while to put him on a boat. No, he's—" "Dol, I don't know what you're talking about." "Really, sir? I'm awfully sorry. I was sure Mr. Archer would have told you long ago." "When was he telling me about it now?" "Yes, I can remember exactly. It was the earlier part of the evening on which Colonel Davison met with his accident. Mr. Archer and I went on to discuss the election results. That's right, and then we—" "All right, I don't want the story of your life. I asked you to tell me—" "Do forgive me, sir. I've got this bad habit of letting my tongue run away with me. I know. It's just that the events of that evening are so indelibly impressed on my memory, sir, if you know what I—" "Yes, sir." "Well, Mr. Archer showed me a letter from the head of his college in Oxford. The master, I think he called himself. It said they were arranging his release from the army and reckoned he'd be out in good time to go into the college when the term begins, which I gather is about the 10th of October, though no doubt you could put me right there." "But he's only been in for 3 or 4 years. You and I and most of the blokes have been in for 6. 7 in my case, sir. You'll recall that I was one of the 1938 militiamen. Yes, I know it seems strange, Mr. Archer getting out so soon, but apparently this is something called the Class B scheme. We had a memo about it a couple of weeks ago, which I'll look out for you, if you're interested." "Don't bother." "How funny Mr. Archer hasn't told you yet. I expect he's waiting for a suitable opportunity, sir, don't you?" "Get out and leave me in peace." "Glad to, sir." Left in peace, the Major sat on at his almost empty table. The bulk of 424 Wireless Section was evidently moving out onto the main road along Raleigh's Alley, making full use of that thoroughfare for the first and last time. The Major's eye missed a letter from the British Drama League saying that Journey's End was not available. It caught an order informing him that with effect from 2 days' time the area of which he had hoped to become a chieftain would be known as Number 9 Independent Transit Area, and would fall under the command of a full colonel dispatched from HQ. He picked up a newspaper headlined, "It's no jokio to live in Tokyo. 600 superforts blast Jap heartland," and put it down again. The other paper contained a large election supplement. He summoned the resolution to study the details of what he had so far been able to take in only as an appalling generality. Turning to an inner page, he read, "Winkworth West. R. Jack, Labour, 28,740. Major General P.O. de C. Biggs Courtney, DSO, Conservative, 9,011. Labour majority, 19,700. 729. Labour gain from Conservative. 1935, Major General P.O. de C. Biggs Courtney, DSO, Conservative, 19,495. W. Mott, Labour, 9,319. Conservative majority, 10,176. The Major dropped his head into his hands. This, he supposed, was the bottom. And yet he felt a stirring of hope. Having sunk to the lowest depths his nature was capable of, he could not help seeing the future as some sort of upward path. Nobody and nothing in his immediate environment gave him the smallest reason for confidence. Dole, Cleaver, Hammond, Davison, Archer, whom he had tried so hard to train up as a conscientious officer, the company, the signal office, chances of leadership, all in their different ways had turned out to be not worth depending on. But the world was wide. Bad things could happen, and it all went on as before. The thought of his friends in Potsdam filled him with encouragement now, not envy. Much of what he believed in must survive. And the guarantee of that was England. England had been up against it in 1940, in 1914, and no doubt earlier with the Napoleon business and so on. She had weathered every storm. She had never gone under. All that was needed was faith. Despite everything that Hargreaves and Archer and the rest of them might do, England would muddle through somehow. Moral fibre. "Hello," I said. "Who are you?" I said it to a child of about 3 who was pottering about on the half-landing between the ground floor of the house, where some people called Davis lived, and the first floor, where I and my wife and children lived. The child, now before me, was not one of mine. He looked old-fashioned in some way, probably because instead of ordinary children's clothes, he wore scaled-down versions of grown-up clothes, including miniature black lace-up boots. His eyes were alarmed or vacant, their roundness repeated in the rim of the amber-coloured dummy he was sucking. As I approached, he ran incompetently away up the further flight. I tried to speak heartily to him, but most likely had only sounded accusing. Accusing was how I often felt in those days, especially after a morning duty in the library reference room, being talked to most of the way by my colleague, Ewan Jenkins, and about his wife's headaches too. I mounted in my turn and entered the kitchen, where my own wife, called Jean, was straining some potatoes into the wash-hand basin that did, but only just did, as a sink. "Hello, darling," she said. "How were the borrowers this morning, then?" "They were readers this morning, not borrowers," I said, kissing her. "Oh, same thing." "Yes, that's right. They were as usual, I'm sorry to say. Who was that extraordinary child I saw on the stairs?" "Shh! Must have been one of Betty's. She had to bring them with her." Jean pointed towards the sitting-room, where clicks and thumps suggested domestic work could be heard. "Betty's?" I whispered. "What's going on?" "She's just finishing up in there. Betty Arnolfson. You remember the girl Mayor Webster was going to fix us up with. You know." "Oh, the delinquent. I'd forgotten all about it." "She's coming to lunch." "Betty Arnolfson?" "No, Mayor, dull." "Oh, Christ." "Now, don't be nasty, John. She's been very kind to us. Just because she's a bit boring, that doesn't mean she—" "Just because? A bit boring? If it were only that. The woman's a menace, a threat to Western values. Terrifying to think of her being a social worker.